Given the landscape of the sport, specifically the impending sale of CrossFit and WFP, do you foresee a future where the two are working in some capacity?
I could see that there could be some awesome collaboration that would elevate the sport, but I could also perceive where both whoever the new owner of CrossFit is and the WFP don't collaborate at all and become like true competitors, which I would be very against. I think.
All right, this past weekend, these coaches went to WFP, the World Fitness Project, and after returning, Chris posted Instagram and asked if you guys had any questions. So today we're going to take some time and go through all those questions and give you some well-rounded answers.
WFP Tour Stop 1.
Tour Stop 1.
Indianapolis, baby.
It's an inaugural event. Inaugural season?
Both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive in. So first question from Lisa. Does the WFP testing body bias a different type of athlete than typical CrossFit, for example, games, semis, rogue, etc. testing, based on first impressions?
First impressions, I wouldn't say there was huge biases. Just from the outside looking in, I think that for the most part, over the course of all of those events, I think that it tested CrossFit pretty well. That's just from the outside looking in. Now, I don't know what it's going to look like because the tour stops and the qualifiers for the tour stops and then the finals, like I'm not sure how much of those need to be like separated and isolated into different buckets in terms of like an all-around test. Like is tour stop 1 with the qualifier a self-contained test? Is he going to test different things in the qualifier and tour stop 2? And then what's actually waiting for us in the final? So as of right now, if you consider this, the qualifier events and the tour stop, the actual like on-site events, like one just isolated bucket of tests, I feel like it was actually pretty good. I don't think that there was too big of a bias inside of there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the structure of the season and having an actual championship with double points, that in order for us to evaluate all of it properly, I think we're going to have to see all of them. Because I've talked to Will and I don't know anything about the workouts or what's in them or any of that stuff. But by listening to his logic about what he's doing, it is more about a seasonal structure than it is trying to pick, hey, this is the way we test and we're going to do it all the time. So I think it'd be a mistake probably for athletes too, to think that Tour Stop 1 programming is reflective of what we're going to see all the time. So I would say I thought the testing was great and pretty balanced and had a lot of cool stuff in it, but I don't think that it's reflective of what we can say WFP programming is going to be.
Yeah, we might not be able to say that until later on.
We only have one real data point.
Yeah.
I have a slightly different opinion.
Oh.
But maybe I'm just devil's advocate. I did feel it was slightly biased towards strength and less conditioning, just because the longest event, which was the first one, what was the average time there? Yeah.
I forgot.
The best times were like 16, 17 minutes.
Yeah.
So under 20 minute
Under 20
workout.
minutes, yeah.
And a lot of them were shorter, I'm sure, partially logistical reasons. This might be more for women. I felt like it did bias a little bit of strength on the women's side. Just the sandbag and the combination of kind of taking away any type of advantage of a gymnastics movement paired with something like fairly heavy. I wouldn't say it was overly heavy, but
no, I think that absolutely holds true for pro women, I think, above everything. Like if you were to look at the same workouts for challenger women or challenger men, I think that the strength importance of it came down a little bit and the conditioning side or like the execution side came up a little bit.
Because the loads were just a little bit lighter.
If you look at the loads that the pro women were doing compared to the relative loads of everybody else, the pro men's were heavy, but I don't think they were as much of a bottleneck as some of the pro women movements, the 150 sandbag, the 50-pound dumbbells. Like it was just a very big difference.
It's going to be interesting to see because this is one of 3 series of tests that also would include a qualifier that kind of pre-sorts who goes to these events as well. So I'm just curious to see how it will lay out and how you continue to kind of remove biases through basically 6 series of tests, 3 qualifiers, 3 in person. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the same people who came through the qualifier in the challenger division for this one come in through Tour Stop 2 as well, or if there's a different series of qualification tests come through and you're going to get a different batch of athletes that then make it to the on-site one.
Yeah.
I might devil's advocate your devil's advocate in that the power workout and the strength tests were both only 50 points. But I get what you're saying, that like the running had barbell cycling that was moderate weight in it, and all of the gymnastics skills basically, like even the rope climbs had a yoke in it. So there was some strength component in almost every pairing.
yeah.
All right, fair enough.
Cool. All right, next question, and
slightly.
I'm gonna I'm gonna try to keep these kind of organized on the same theme of like programming, and then we'll kind of go into like experience. So this next question from Flow Booms: how did it affect the athletes that were able to prepare for the workouts in advance compared to typical CrossFit events? Did it, for example, increase or reduce nervousness, or were some perhaps too set on a fixed plan that ultimately had to be changed? So the context is knowing the events well ahead of time, and how did that impact their getting prepared for the events?
I mean, I coached 3 people that competed, and all 3 of them didn't really get to like take advantage of that well, because the online semifinal was the week before, and Linda was competing in the Wadland Fest in Malaga. So I didn't really have an opportunity to really do what I would normally do in a preparatory phase with planned workouts for 3 weeks. But from a nervousness perspective, I don't think practicing workouts and knowing what you have to do makes anybody any less nervous on game day. Like, I think all that is going to do is give people more confidence in knowing finish times, break strategies, warm-up strategies, and all of that type of stuff. And one of the things I thought that it really did was it cleaned up the briefing process. Like, we showed up to the briefings, and some athletes didn't even need to go, and like people were just really confident, and there were only a couple questions, where when you're at a competition, you're getting the workouts for the first time. Oh my God, you could be there for like an hour of people being like, well, what if I don't tie my shoes? What if you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, Adam, you're a huge fan of that, the workouts being left unknown, right? And we just figure it out on game day.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And nothing bad ever comes from that. Next question. The only thing that the standards-wise, the briefing-wise, was the jerk one. The jerk, Yeah, there was lots of questions on that.
Yeah.
And, they ended up
and it got changed.
They changed a lot of things.
So, I heard there was like some discrepancy where some people that had to unrack and actually get behind the line to start their jerk, and then some were held to a standard of they could do the jerk, and as long as they finished behind the line before they dropped it, that's what would count, which really changes how you approach your split jerk, meaning like it messes with your brace. There's
a couple of different things. So the initial standard was you had to start and finish behind the line. So there was a line that was supposed to be 18 inches back from the rack, I think. Take it out of the rack, step both feet back behind that line. You could do your jerk. If in a split jerk your front foot comes in front of the line, you still recover. Both feet have to finish back behind it. I think that that was what they left. I don't think they changed that. I think what ended up happening is maybe there were some judges who weren't really strict about both toes being behind, especially when they're up overhead. Yeah. And honestly, I would actually agree with that. So they did it for safety. They did it to make sure that the athletes chasing a jerk forward that was maybe a little bit shaky wouldn't run into the rig.
Yeah. Or when you drop it, you have the plates hit the...
Yeah, so just trying to keep them clear of that. I actually think that they brought in a new safety concern as a result of that, in terms of if you've got 400 pounds going up overhead or 300 pounds for some of the girls, and then you're in front of the line and they're telling you to push backwards, trying to walk backwards with that amount of weight up overhead and looking down to see if your toes are behind the line is as sketchy as trying to go forward towards the rack. So I think maybe starting them behind the line would have been good, and then letting them finish wherever they ended up finishing might have been a better idea.
Yeah.
Luckily, nothing happened that I saw. There was no real concerns with it. The other jerk standard that was very confusing to begin with was once the guys were going to get above 225 and the girls above 155.
I think it was 155, 255, I think.
Somewhere around there.
Yes, something like that.
So once they got up above a certain weight, they couldn't bring it back down to their shoulders after the lift. That was the way that the rule was originally written. They couldn't bring it back down to their shoulders after the lift. If you did that above whatever that weight threshold was, 225, 155, it actually was going to be a no rep. And so people started pushing back on that in the briefing in terms of, well, what if I just did it anyways? Are you going to penalize me further? If I'm just taking a warm-up attempt, I know what weight I want to hit. If I bring this guy back down to my shoulders and put it in the rack versus dropping to the ground, having to strip the weights, put the bar back in, put the weights back in, and waste 45 seconds, what's my penalty on that? And they just kept pushing, like, well, what if I don't do that? And so eventually Will got to the point where it was, all right, you guys can bring it back down to your shoulders at any weight you want. You can put it back in the rack. It's not a no rep. But if you do drop it back down to the floor, you have to strip it to a certain weight before you can put it back in the rack.
Got it.
Yeah.
What do you think the solution to that is? Getting jerk blocks?
Yeah, I was telling Max at the briefing, I was saying jerk blocks. I think jerk blocks would have solved the line issue. And I also think it would have solved the bringing it back down issue. So both of them came from a good place. They came from a place of trying to protect the athletes, keep them clear of the rack, and also make sure that they're not obsessed with trying to bring down a heavy bar into a rack position.
Yeah, not everyone's Jay Crouch. who was bringing it behind his neck, which I thought was the most impressive part of a 417 jerk. Cool. This dude's re-racking behind his neck, and I was like, that needs to be a tiebreak of some sort. That was pretty awesome.
Extra points.
Anything else you want to add to that one?
No, I think that jerk blocks might have solved that. I know that it's more money and it's more equipment, and it's
you have to adjust.
Well, it's also, I mean, they adjust the yoke in between and stuff, and they were
true,
adjusting the squat racks in between, so it could have happened. They did that shouldered overhead workout of the games with jerk blocks. I feel like it worked fine.
Yeah, but if it's those big metal jerk blocks like we have, it's a 30-minute process.
Yeah.
That's what's. I brought that up to somebody, and they were like, "Well, the heat times would have to be spread out because if you have all four corners that need to be lifted up, you might need 2 floor people." And I was like,
The other part of that is the echo sled thing happened in between the jerks, so you could have been setting up the heat after while this heat had gone there.
That's true.
Yeah, so there's plenty of time for the adjustments.
And darken the floor with the lighting so that people couldn't see. Like if you're at a circus and there's
stage adjustments.
Yeah, I'm always wanting to put a flashlight to watch this. What
are you
How
doing
are you getting
over
that
there?
off the stage?
All right, let's move on to questions that kind of involve more like experience of the competition itself for coach and athlete side. So how was the coach athlete? This is from Carrie Samsel, Canada. Carrie Samsel.
Carrie.
Oh yeah, Carrie. How was the coach athlete experience as compared to other big competitions, CrossFit Games, regionals, semifinals, sanctionals, Rogue, Wodapalooza, etc.?
I thought it was pretty good. Like the warm up area. Like there was more than enough space. I mean, we were on an entire full-size soccer field where people were actually playing soccer at one point.
A bunch of people.
Very
Me and
ambiance
Chris and Will were
experience.
playing soccer for a little bit in between.
Yeah. I feel like the environment, I don't know how you guys felt, was very laid back, and in some ways maybe a little too laid back. Like it wasn't the pressure of qualifying for the games or on the line, which I think maybe helped some people relax into it. And for some people, maybe this is the first tour. People have the games still to come. People are waiting for
People just finished the online
just finished,
games.
and they might have been a little bit flat. That was the only thing I feel like intensity and mood. I didn't feel like there was as much crazy competition between people. But as far as what they had laid out for everyone, there was more than enough space, a very good warm-up area as far as they had all the implements except for the burpee blocks, I think.
Yeah, there's no ballistic blocks.
The ballistic blocks was the only thing missing.
They brought in extra echo bikes. I think they were low on that for one event or
At
something
one point
like
when the
that.
challengers were warming up, there was only one echo
Yeah,
bike
yeah,
out
yeah.
there, which
Yeah.
I
That
mean,
wasn't
you
for
can
the pros,
That's
but-
that's usually how it is at competitions. You just kind of make it work, but then they brought 2 extras out, and then there's more than enough afterwards.
I would say from my vantage point, it was a way better experience from a coach's perspective. I mean, I'm biased more towards a laid back, chill environment without a ton of noise. I love the pressure. That was something like an athlete having pressure that they have to perform. I like that, but I hate the, extra, you going into a warm-up area and there's 8,000 people around and you can't even get people to warm up. So I was super happy about that. I think all the feedback I got from all the athletes was that it was a net better experience in the briefings, just little subtle things. Like you can go to competitions, specifically the games, and they brief a workout and you ask a question. And I feel like the general energy is why are you asking a question here? Whereas they were just okay, cool. They just answered the questions. And I just remember thinking oh, this is a really nice vibe. People are just wanting to put on a good experience. They see the coaches, the athletes, the agents, whatever, as all part of building this whole new thing. So whether that can maintain after this being the first inaugural event and just be part of their overall ethos, who knows? But in terms of my personal experience, I felt walking away from that competition feeling just good. It was oh, I'm welcomed to be here. I'm not just some, annoying person that's a Sherpa for an athlete. You
still
can,
that.
yes, I still am, but less so. And I felt like I had a voice. I could talk to people, express my ideas.
Yeah.
People were receptive to listening. I just enjoyed all of that.
Yeah, to me, from the outside, I think the things you guys are talking about are very clear in terms of the hierarchy that they kind of set. The pros were pampered. They were made to feel like they were VIPs all weekend long. They were taken care of. They were made sure that they were treated like celebrities and stars. Challengers maybe a little bit less so in terms of the way that they scaled their workouts, the way that the division is set up to be able to progress over the course of the season. But then I had athletes over on the individual side. I also had athletes on the team side. And I think the team side, the perception of those athletes might be a little bit different than the individual side. I think that they probably necessarily didn't get as much exposure. They didn't get as much attention. They didn't get as much love. Their workout area kind of looked like a warm-up area. I remember I went over there for the first briefing. And I was like, oh, where are you guys going to be competing at? This is a cool warm-up area. They're like, no, this is our floor. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was just like, it was off in the corner. The briefings were kind of like old briefings in terms of like somebody would ask a question and they would be like, offended that you asked a question. And so it was very different than the individuals. And I think that it's important for WFP to receive a little bit of feedback from that crew of athletes, because I honestly think that that demographic of athlete is the one that's going to push that instance of competition forward. I think that they're already going out of their way to make sure that pros are taken care of. They're going to speak very highly of their experience in their competition, and they're going to put butts in seats. But I think if you're really trying to grow this thing up from a grassroots level, all of the really successful competitions that we've seen do a great job with the other divisions. They go above and beyond with them also. So I think making sure that, one, their workouts, their briefings, their experience is taken care of, and two, their actual like workout floor and layout and environment is maybe upgraded a little bit to make sure that they keep coming back and they tell their friends about it when they get back, and they encourage more signups, because there were some of those divisions that had like 2 or 3 teams sign up. So they want to fill those up more, I think, in my opinion. And it starts by making sure that those athletes feel the same way as the indies did. I was in the warm-up area for I came over to watch some of the challengers and stuff like that. So while some of the, what were those divisions called? Competitors. Yeah. So some of the competitors were saying they got there in the morning and challengers hadn't started on the main floor. And they're like, I don't understand why we couldn't just do the workout on the main floor. And I was like, I wonder what that is. Like if it was workout construction or whatever. And I thought that it actually would be really good to do that, because then you have professional videos and imagery of the masters athletes and the non-pros for all of your marketing. So maybe that's something that could be put into place for Phoenix is, hey, if you have the time, write one of the workouts that it's the same thing, so they could just go on the main floor, even if it's not all of them. Like at Wadapalooza, they had they did compete on all of the floors, but in terms of just like getting you onto the main stage, you're like doing the same thing in the same area, in the same backdrop, with the same look and imagery and all that stuff. I feel like it would go a long way. You give them one workout a day early in the morning before the indies start and make them feel like they're not segregated and pushed off to the side. I feel like it would go a long way.
Yeah, it feels very reminiscent of age groups being in the age group pavilion, but them getting one workout in the Coliseum or 2 workouts on the Coliseum. But I actually reached out to some of our TTT people who were on a team there and asked them for feedback. And they have like regional or semifinal experience and everything. And they came into it actually with fairly low expectations, because I didn't think they knew that they weren't going to get the same experience as the pros and challengers, but there's a lot of things that could be cleaned up. And it's actually a lot of small things for them. Like the floor wasn't long enough for worm lunges and they had to change standards, but they actually felt they were receptive. They changed some things last second there. But the floor thing was actually something that brought up. They said it would be cool to do one workout on the main floor.
Yeah, just something.
Real quick, we'll dive into some more, but I want to go back to a point you made about the kind of the mood or the environment of how it wasn't this like super high level, nervous, intense environment, because really there wasn't like a lot on the line other than like if you're trying to win and get some money. Do you think that that's necessary with this format, or okay, considering that there's 2 other stops and there's other competitions going on, that it's okay to have these types of environments in a competition setting where it's not like cutthroat, like everything on the line, where you're fully peaked for your year?
I mean, I feel like this year it's good to have those kinds of experiences. I think this year is so clustered with the schedule and the number of competitions that to have everybody go balls to the wall every single time they step out on the competition floor is a recipe for danger, like failure. So I think, I forget who was given an interview and they were actually talking about that they were mindful of their efforts across, knowing that it was the first one. It might have been Koski. Somebody was saying that in one of it's like, okay,
he said it's going to be a long season.
It's going to be a long season. Like I know that this tour stop, like I'm not finishing where I want, but just like the difference between like 21st place and 15th place might still add up at the end of the year. So like I'm going to try and stay dialed in, but I'm also going to make sure that I'm competing intelligently at the end of it.
The other, were you finished your thought?
That's good.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking, even just before this podcast, was there's a lot of production that's going into this, and there's a lot of people commenting on it in the space. but this is literally the first time they hosted a competition. So
Ever.
like ever. So trying, like anybody doing anything for the first time is not usually going to be good. And I think if you hold looking at it with that lens, it was like, wow, this was really good considering a first run through. And I think some of that environmental stuff, even after one time, is already going to be shifted, because I heard multiple people saying that their whole sporting outlook now has shifted, that they're trying to compete for a pro card because they want that to be what their actual sporting thing. And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, wow, that's going to be like a real paradigm shift, that now, if that is the case, there's going to be some cutthroat competition to be differentiating yourself to like make it through a qualifier or take 15th, because that 15th gives you points to get into the finale, and the finale's double points, and then that gets you into something else. So I feel like some of that stuff that we felt in iteration number 1 after 1 or 2 seasons will completely transform from a competitor energy standpoint, because there is they've answered a lot of questions and a lot of frustrations that people in CrossFit have had. And one of them is structure. They're like, here's our season. Here's our point system. It might not be perfect, but it is one, and nobody's done it before. So I think people are going to latch on to that if this continues to get legs.
Yeah, I don't know what it'll turn into or how it'll look, but it could be, it could set up for some good stories down the line of like, hey, this person's points are on the line, and they're in 8th place, but if they actually, it like makes a better story if you're like, bottom 10 or something, actually doing well in this event creates some narrative behind that. So it makes it a little bit of a better experience as a spectator to watch.
Yeah. One piece of feedback that I had on that point, on like the idea of like putting some skin on the line in terms of like progressing up and getting your pro card, was I feel like they should give the winner of the challenger division a pro invite to the next event. I like just hanging out with those challengers. Like they were pushing as hard as the pros were. They were a little bit like offended that the workouts were down, but it was like, because what ends up happening is somebody wins the qualifier, they get in the pro division, but they could take last place on all of those, but they're still going to get more points than somebody that they barely beat inside that qualifier who has no chance of finishing above them, no matter how good they did at those events or how good they are overall. So I think giving the ability, like a little bit more, instead of like a year-long process for the challengers, if you win an on-site challenger event, you get a pro invite for the next one. I feel like that would go a long way into making sure that the stuff that Max was saying actually like incite them a little bit, excite them, give them something to really compete for on that weekend.
So right now the incentive for a pro is if you made it to the pro stop through the qualifier, the best, whoever finished the highest from that qualifier at the in-person event gets invited to the next one.
No. That's what he's saying. That's what he's
No, not challengers, pros. I'm saying like Colton was in the pro and he made it through the qualifier. I thought I read that he was like the highest finisher from the qualifier in the pro, so he gets invited to the next one.
Oh, I didn't know that was the case. I thought he had to requalify.
Okay, I could be. I'll check on that. Gilpin was explaining that to me
I
earlier,
heard, so this could be on me, but I heard a lot of different things about the season that were not right. Like somebody came up to me and they're like, oh, pros aren't guaranteed to go into the finale. And I talked to Travis. I was like, I thought you were guaranteed. Like, I've been planning your year so that you were competing in December.
Wait a minute. Hold up.
I was like, this is news to me.
Yeah.
And then he asked Will, and he's like, no, that is the case. So I think there's either misinformation or not all the information has been disseminated or not all the athletes know. But I'm not sure if that is the case.
Okay. But the pro card, the people that have their pro card contract signed are guaranteed all 3,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So how was the next question from PJW Barry? How was the in-person fan experience at WFP? I love the online experience, seeing all the top athletes together this early. Also, I love the pro 3 heats versus 4. It actually made the 2 challenger heats more fun to watch. I cared about the race. Do you think the enthusiasm for this format will build?
So the question was more fan experience than anything else?
How was the fan experience?
Yeah. My family came and watched because it was like 2 hours away from Dayton, so they drove over. I think that they had a great time. They like the appeal and the aesthetic of the event was very professional. It was very cool. The venue was amazing. So like the on-site fan experience, I feel like was a level above something like regionals where it's in a abandoned warehouse somewhere and it's hard to follow what's going on. The the race graphics up at the top, and I don't know, maybe you can speak to this, but they had these huge screens facing all four sides that showed you a leaderboard, like an active leaderboard that you can follow along with. It was hard to see in person, but it at least was something that they can actually like stay in touch with the race and understand what's happening out on the floor, which I feel like in person sometimes is what people miss. Sometimes on the streams they do a really good job of showing like a live leaderboard and where the reps are and everything else, but to see that in person and be able to follow along and be like, oh, they're at this point in the race, or they just did this amount on their jerks, I thought that was pretty cool.
I thought too, well, so they put a lot of money and time into the lighting aspect of it. I don't know if the lighting made my fan experience better, but I did think about watching all the workouts, and almost every one of the workouts, for me at least, was relatively clear to understand who was leading and where people were in the race. And I think, because, for example, and it got messy on like the legless rope climb, normal rope climb workout. But for the most part, the leaders, because you're moving the yoke to one side of the floor and then it stays there and then you move it back, there was a lot of movement that allowed it to be a little bit easier to understand who was in the race. And the workouts themselves just lend themselves to a lot of finishing races. Like there was just a lot of, and I don't know if that was like, man, they got the workouts right, or if it just was like happenstance, but I did notice that. I thought the music was really good. The ambiance of the darkness with the spotlight. For me, I really like that. Because if you go to like a show, a circus, a fight, that like, hey, everything's dark. I did walk outside a couple times and think I was going blind from the sun.
Someone actually asked, Laurie Winkleman asked, how did the lighting affect things for the athletes?
I heard a decent amount of complaints on, there were 3 GHDs. They said going down, lights straight in the eye, sitting up, lights straight in the eye.
Rope climbs.
Yeah, at rope climbs, which they said was a little bit more sketchy. And nobody complained about it in person on the jerk, but I heard people commenting on it that it was an issue.
The rule for the jerk was at the 8-minute mark, if you had the bar out of the rack, you could still complete your lift, but the lights changed at the 8-minute mark. And so people would take the bar out of the rack and get ready to do their lift. Dark. And it like the lighting would change, which is more than a little distracting when you're going for a 1RM.
It was also hard to see. That was a fan experience thing. Hard to see when the lights went out. Like it actually got really dark. So if somebody was lifting, you just kind of didn't see it.
I have a few different fan experience things. One from Lydia's family who was there watching, and they've been to a fair amount of comps now. They just had very little things like they were running the same commercials over and over again that they were getting kind of tired of. And I know they did put a lot of production into going around the world and interviewing these athletes leading up and posting that stuff on YouTube. So I was like, well, you could just play those videos. You've already done them and give the filler in between, I think. But the other side of it was just the aesthetics of the layout. Like when we got the floor plans, I was like, this looks just like Rogue, with a section of the turf and a section obviously of rig and matting. And I feel like it's a nice blend between like, take North Park and put it in a Coliseum, right? Where you have flexibility to do stuff like sleds and other things that are in a temperature controlled place. So you don't have the issue of like it getting wet and like one sled is like moving faster. Obviously a much shorter space, but they implemented, going back to the slight strength bias, they implemented more things that you don't normally see in like even a semifinal, like yoke walking and heavy sandbags and even a jerk event. Like, so it has to me this hybrid feel of like, it's obviously not the games and everything's on a shorter time frame, but the quality of the workouts are leveled up where it's not just something we could just do in an online qualifier because the equipment is a bit more selective. And I like that because I think it creates a separation, a huge separation where you can see like the games athletes, like they handle those workouts so well. And I partially just feel like it's experience. Like they know they have more experience doing that stuff live.
Yeah, I think it's better for athletes too, right? It keeps their training more rounded and allows them to get outside of just like, we say it all the time, training in a phone booth. Trying to be really good at going up and down. I think going back to one thing that I thought would be neat if they could build on is take the stories from this first stop and continue that to build hype and excitement for the next one. So it's like James Sprague got no rep on a handstand walk that was controversial and could have been potentially top of the podium. will he make his comeback on Tour Stop 2? Like, I like that you'll potentially see a large majority of the same athletes competing against each other again. So it could kind of like build this rivalry and make it this continuation where it's like a long story of the season, which I think we haven't seen yet throughout a year in the sport in any format. So I think that could be pretty cool.
And the storyline should be semi built in with the point system.
Yeah.
So like there should be some of that they could just latch onto. Where was the vendor village?
It was over by the competitor side.
Yeah, I don't think there was. I think that was also not super robust.
Yes, Christian Vega asked a really important question. He asked if there was food trucks.
There was a huge cafeteria.
Dude,
right?
and that cafeteria was really good.
It actually wasn't that bad. Yeah,
they had like burrito bowls and wraps and
a little buffet. They had the acai bowls in there.
Yeah,
that venue was super nice.
Yeah.
That's
it
cool.
was a youth or just sports complex. I think they had like 60-something fields between baseball, soccer, the indoor. Indiana Pacers had a building there where there was a practice facility. Somebody told me that facility we were in was for the Colts. Is that right?
Dude, it easily could have been. That place was enormous.
But I would have had to have thought if that
Colts.
Colts. What did I say?
I don't
Colts?
know.
Oh, Colts.
Drink the
Kool-Aid. I forgot what. Oh, I was gonna say I would thought if it was for the Colts, they would have had the logo, the Colts logo, or something somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyways,
all right. So this last question will kind of wrap it up from the Instagram post on Training Think Tanks. And Jerry Lynn asked learnings for the coaches on things to work on for their athletes. Also, when will we have a TTT coach meet and greet?
Okay, I think she was there. She'll comment, I'm sure. I think she was there, and I think Lydia's mom met her, and she comments on our stuff all the time. Yeah, she described somebody that was just cheering for everybody and said they're a huge fan of TTT. I think it was her.
Awesome.
Nice.
So sorry, repeat the question.
We should all just take her out for a lunch.
Yes.
Honestly, yeah.
We're just going to host one
Well,
for you.
in terms of the meet,
I was going to say,
and greet
just
is
hit
just
us
her.
up.
Yeah.
Just
I'll
hit
actually
us
answer
up.
that.
we're just going to take you out to lunch.
First part of the question, learnings for the coaches on things to work on for their athletes. And I think just specific to this event.
I mean, so I had somebody who, Lydia Fish, did not. We actually elected not to do in-affiliate semifinals because it was the weekend before. And she came down here. We did a whole simulation. And so kind of going back to the preparation, was it good? Was it helpful? It's really it was no different than, I think, semifinals even.
Yeah.
They do release those ahead of time. But for her, it was an interesting experience because we couldn't exactly do the transitions, but for the first time, I think ever, she didn't PR all of her simulation, like times versus in person. And I actually think that messed with her a little bit psychologically because it's just typically not what happens. But I explained that that's actually progress because she'll PR something by 3 minutes and then be borderline rhabdo on day 3, going into day 3, and she wasn't really sore that whole weekend. So I think it was just a change in her evolution as an athlete. But sometimes testing things in full, like we did everything in order, 2 workouts at a time, it can throw people for a loop because if it doesn't feel the same or if it doesn't work out the same, they start to get a little bit like what's going on. Bethany was a different story. She did do in affiliate semifinals, so she was certainly a little banged up from that, just even the travel. We weren't able to really test any of the workouts in full, partially because of that, partially just because of stuff she's had going on. And so she was very underprepared, which she knew for these events. And that was definitely, there was a physical aspect, but that was a very hard mental aspect for her that weighed on her heavily, especially day 1. But the goal really was to kind of get through the competition because the format does allow you, every point matters. So you really just need to collect your points. And kind of a cool thing just about Bethany as a person, they were going out on the competition floor for the last event. And by the end of a comp, everyone's kind of drained, right? And this workout was kind of gross. And she just looked around and she said, every girl just kind of had their head down, kind of had this expression of I want to get this over with. And she just kind of rallied them all. And she was like, I'm in last place. Let's just go out there and put a smile on her face because we all earned our way here. It was really hard for her, emotionally the whole weekend. And I'm really proud of her for kind of pulling it together because, it's embarrassing. She got, I think, 4th at the games last year. And to come in, she couldn't do Wodapalooza. But anyway, I just thought it was a cool moment.
Yeah. Thank you, Perrin.
Yeah, that's good.
There's my
More
emotion.
emotional than I thought.
Yeah, you can cut that out too.
No, it's going in.
Yeah.
We're going to use that as the bumper for the video.
Yeah.
I think learnings from the athlete side that I'd probably ask you guys. Would you ever have an athlete do an individual qualifier the week before a competition like this?
No. I mean, if I could avoid it, this was actually something I've been saying, like part of the reason why I want cohesion and more collaboration or whatever you would call it between CrossFit, WFP, Rogue, all these events. I think I have been concerned about it. And I think for two of my athletes, specifically Linda and Travis, it kind of like cost them a little bit. Like Linda she didn't do online semifinal, but she did competition in Spain, which was a qualifier to try to make it to the games. And then you don't really have time to test these workouts, and there's international travel. And it's just a lot to ask of somebody to do that, stay peaked, eat properly while you're traveling, get accustomed to new time domains or time zones. It's not really like a sport like where skill can like take over. Like your fitness has to be peaked. And I feel like,
you got to be a pretty resilient human.
yeah, I mean, there's kind of no way around it this season, but I think Travis obviously tweaking his back, I think partially was the fact that it's like, all right, you couldn't prepare any of these. You competed really hard in a hard subset of workouts the week prior to this. Linda had to travel. She didn't get hurt or anything, but that was kind of the biggest learning, is that if people are going to plan to do these multiple times per year and they're not on the pro circuit, so they also have to do the qualifiers for them, I think people need to be a little bit more deliberate about what they choose to do. Annika just is a very, very resilient trainee that handles a ton of volume that I'm always trying to give less volume. So the volume for her wasn't an issue. It was more just like she had a couple mental lapses that I think took her from performing a lot better relative to the field. So, but that's all stuff that we were already working on. But if possible, that would be something that I will try to put into practice, is how do I make sure that athletes can stay healthy doing this? Because this was only 6 workouts or 6.5. I don't know how you would count that. But if Denmark is closer to looking like the games, and then people are also doing the games, and then the games, and then 2 weeks later is Phoenix, and then you got to qualify into Denmark. Like, it's going to potentially be a lot.
And Rogue is in there, and
Rogue,
Denmark's coming
yes.
up. Yeah, so the athletes, that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I feel like the best advice that we can give athletes right now is to try and have clarity on your path for the year, because it's going to be really easy to get distracted. And it's not that you have to do everything. It's that you have to be really, really clear with where you pick your battles and where you try and set your feet down and say, like, this is what I want to do, and not let anything else distract from that. Because we saw this weekend, at least I saw from the outside looking in for a lot of the pros, is basically like, it's really hard to go hard back-to-back weekends like that. Neither of the champions did online semis. And I think like their sharpness over the course of the weekend was very clear to see. Like they just less physical fatigue and resilience was shown. They were just sharper with all of their movements. They were able to recover better between events. And it was just very clear. So that from the athlete side of things, I think the takeaway is almost be really, really careful with where you pick and try and like lay that path ahead of time, as far ahead of time as you can, so that you know what's coming up.
Yeah, I won't speak for all the athletes. Obviously, I'm not there competing, but as a coach, a bunch of mediocre performances is not as fulfilling as a couple of really good ones throughout a year, and that's what we're used to in dealing with. So I think that's just going to be a shift on coaches as well. Like a message to coaches is learning to say no, and pulling the athletes back on some occasions and saying, all right, like I know that you could go do it. It doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
All right.
I had 21 questions on mine.
Yeah. I mean, we can kind of roll through. I got one more, then it does kind of like wrap a bow on these. I think given the landscape, this is from Courtney Morrison, given the landscape of the sport, specifically the impending sale of CrossFit and WFP, do you foresee a future where the two are working in some capacity? So like CrossFit with more of like the training gym side, and then WFP with like, hey, we handle pro athletes in sport.
I could see that there could be some awesome collaboration that would elevate the sport, but I could also perceive where both whoever the new owner of CrossFit is and the WFP don't collaborate at all and become like true competitors, which I would be very against. I think if somebody new is to buy CrossFit, I mean, I don't know how to appeal to them because I don't know who it's going to be, but I would hope that they could figure out how to collaborate with all of the work that WFP has already done. I mean, they already have 40 of the best athletes in the world under contract. They already have some sort of professional working relationship with Red Bull and Adidas, who are two major global brands. There's already a ton. I mean, if you just looked around in the back, almost every single major training organization had coaches represented. All of the agents that I've seen around in the space were there. A lot of the staff of people that were running it were people that have actively worked on running the games. So it would seem like a real shame for there not to be collaboration. And I think it makes the most sense because there's already being capital infused into this thing. And previously there was already a problem with CrossFit's branding about trying to be a methodology and a sport at the same time. So if there were going to be like a perfect time to have a strategic partner to start to create a little bit of a clear separation, I think now would kind of be the case. It's just who knows what the actual business implications of that would look like and what the WFP would want and what the new owner of CrossFit would want and if those things will align. And there's already the drama that is promoted on all these social media things. So I don't know if it's going to be, but in a best case scenario world, I hope that they collaborate.
Yeah, we'll see.
You guys
all right, you've got some questions?
Oh, yeah, sure. You could just go through them. There were a lot of the similar ones, so we might be able to axe some of them out.
Okay, so from this list of questions, we actually had a lot of people ask something similar, but basically the question is, do you think this is financially sustainable? There were comments on it not being like completely full stands, the amount of money they're paying the athletes. Where do you see this going over, a couple years?
I mean, this kind of circles back to what I said earlier about this being the first one that they did. So if every competition ever from here on out at WFP looked like what we just saw, it would not be sustainable. I think that would be pretty clear. Like the amount of investment in lighting, staffing, equipment, rental of the venue, whatever, paying the athletes to be there, it would never be captured based on what they did. But as a startup business entity, none of us in here, and probably nobody making videos on it, has any idea what their actual long-term revenue model looks like and what future competitions are going to look like. So in Denmark, if there's 1,000 competitors there and Adidas ramps up their sponsorship, like it could potentially be profitable and sustainable. But I understand the concerns that everyone's bringing up because anybody with an analytical brain can look at this and be like, okay, well, this production is far exceeding what they're getting in, but also every startup on the planet is like that. They're built to lose money in the beginning. So that doesn't worry me necessarily that there wasn't enough money made from event one, but I think anybody that's kind of involved in the space is looking at it being like, okay, but like, where do we go from here? Like, how are you going to right this ship? And I'm curious about it. I don't think it's sustainable in what I saw, but I also know that there's some pretty serious business people behind it and a lot of professionals in this space who have run profitable events. So I think that there's still hope for it. I wouldn't look at it and be like, oh, well, this is going to be gone in 2 years because of this one event.
I think it was an intentional. I think they intentionally went out to try and make this a spectacle. And I think that was accomplished. I think that box was checked. But I think that also, like you were saying, I have to imagine that there's long-term plans in place to be able to try and make this a little bit more revenue generating for them. Whether it comes with trying to fill out the competitor divisions, where it comes from saving money on some of the expenses from the venue and the equipment, the lighting and all of that. But looking at this from the outside, it was like there was a lot of things where it was almost like the old guy from Jurassic Park, like we spared no expense. Like they wanted this one to be like over the top. They wanted to put their name out there and stamp themselves inside of this, like this environment. It's like, hey, we're here and we're going to be here for a while. So you got to pay attention to us. And I think that was accomplished.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. I don't, who knows how much actual money went into funding it, but it was well funded. And if you just look at the production of that one thing, that's not bankrupting whatever this entity is. So I think it was mindful, deliberate. I think it was also fast. Like one of my biggest concerns, and I've already I sent Will a message that basically saying like, oh, thanks for a good weekend. And then I was like, and by the way, here's my feedback. And I sent them like 80 messages. But as I was going through that process, I just lost my train of thought entirely.
I'll tell.
Can you cut that?
I had a
No way.
I had a conversation with Will.
I'm so tired.
During the briefing when they were getting like their yokes fitted. I'm like, Will came up to me. I'm like, dude, you look like you haven't gotten any sleep. He's like, it's all right.
Yeah.
But he was joking. He said, since you were his coach and mentor for so many years, if anyone complains about the programming, he's just going to blame it on you.
He did tell me that.
That's awesome.
Damn it, I lost my train of thought and I had something important.
You're talking about how being fast.
Yeah,
something
sustainable.
About it being fast.
Oh,
Yeah,
fast.
fast.
I told him my biggest concern was that they executed on this in like 4 months,
Yeah.
like
Very
from the
quickly,
time they
yeah.
announced. And I think like part of the reason why the competitors division probably wasn't full is because they didn't really have any time to market. No one knew that it was happening. So I think that there is a possibility that this could have been a really big catalyst snowball that gets the ball rolling. But like, if you could rewind time and find the first High Rocks, I'm sure if you showed up, obviously all the production wouldn't have been big, but it probably wasn't super profitable. It was probably just like a bunch of people from the gym brought dumbbells and sleds and whatever and had people sign up. So I think that the sustainability could easily come from that as evidence.
I think they'll find something. If you think of something like Wadapalooza, who's had, years of success with getting athletes there and like filling up stands, athletes wanted to go for the experience. They wanted the shoes back in the day. That was like a big one. They wanted to say, I went to Miami and did, like a Bayfront workout or jumped in the water. So they'll find something. It reminds me, if you go back in time to when Grid was created, you had investors come in, they had a lot of money. They spared no expense as well.
MSG,
they flew everyone
event.
out. They at the time, they tried to get the biggest named athletes. They didn't get a lot of them. They got like kind of half and half, it seemed like, because there was this divide culturally of like, oh, if you do Grid, you don't support CrossFit.
Kind of similar.
But like, I mean, it's like almost all the top name athletes were there. So I'm just curious to see like if there's anything that could be learned from that. I know it's a very different sport, very different people running it, but the startup seems so similar to me. Like they flew us out there for like the combine at Vegas, put us all up in hotels, and you would have thought that this sport had been around for 10 years or more. Like it was like a big spectacle.
They also had TV contracts from the beginning for Grid too. And
they rented out Madison Square Garden.
Part of my thought process, I have no idea. Part of my thought process with all the lights and stuff, and even the graphics, like you said, they're ahead of the curve with like even being able to see all that, is I'm like, are they trying to make this TV friendly so that they can get a TV deal right out the gate? Because I think that as financially is probably the most lucrative.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of that is the sustainability issue that I'm most concerned about, and it's not a WFP issue. It's a sport of fitness issue. Is that we don't have a spectator friendly sport yet. Period. Like they're long weekends. Each workout spans as long as a normal professional game. Like if you just say workout 1 to go through both heats of girls, both heats of guys, it's like, I don't know, 3 hours. That's how long an NBA game is or an NFL game is. So I feel like there is something that has to be done on that front, but I'm sure that the people that are in there are trying to figure that out. Like, what's the solution to it?
Did you watch I didn't watch a stream. They had announcers, like the daughters and all that.
Yeah, Tommy Marquez announced.
Yeah, were they doing that in between the events?
They would do it post-event, and it was good. I think it was helpful. I think there was a struggle of, it wasn't that they were trying to talk about it like it was something different than CrossFit, but you could tell there was a struggle sometimes to create a good story behind it of like why this is a different experience and things that they didn't expect. So I didn't watch all of them, but the couple times I did kind of tune into those, that's the feeling that I had. But I think it was helpful. And like, again, like expectations are going to be different for everyone when it's the first time they've done it, So I think, I mean, watching the live stream, at home all weekend, I thought it was a good experience. And, for it being the first time, it was like really solid.
Yeah, I watched some events on the live stream. A lot of people back here told me that this was the best live stream they've ever watched as a sporting spectacle in terms of like knowing where things were, because the race was always listed on the right-hand side. They zoomed out and panned out to the full field very frequently, so it wasn't just on one person. The announcing was pretty solid. I did hear from a lot of people the like comments of the awkwardness of like, I mean, whether you admit it or not, like if somebody like Vellner is a famous figure, it's because he's a multiple times podium games athlete.
Yeah.
And so like to not
being
be
able to reference that.
Yeah, so it's just hard to like reference like,
Right.
well, why are these people great athletes? Well, because they've done great things in this sport that has largely been called CrossFit, and that creates some kind of friction, which is, again, it circles back to my like, I want there to be some sort of togetherness in this whole process.
Is it like a similar situation like Live PGA where it's like, what are we allowed to say or talk about? It's like we're all here because of the PGA, in a sense. You know, I don't know if it's the same level, but
yeah, I'm not sure too. Like, they might have to not say it because they could get sued for saying it. Like, I don't know what the legal ramifications or any of that stuff actually is. Anyways, any other good ones?
I mean, most of these we kind of covered. There was also, was there food trucks? And it was about crowd attendance, lighting, money. Lanny, Beast Wellington said, Hiller said it was hands down the best DJ at any CrossFit comp. Do you agree?
I don't know if I pay attention.
I mean,
to
that
the
does
music
matter.
enough.
You know?
I don't pay
I
attention.
didn't even.
I try and tune it
You don't
out.
even hear it.
I did
they-
have 2 or 3 people comment to me about it though, but I'm in my own world. I don't think I can notice.
Did they do the announcement of the athletes every single event? Because on the live stream they did, where they like came out, you know, full of their arms.
Smoke.
Yeah. Did it feel redundant of like continuously repeating the athletes' names?
I mean, I wouldn't have said redundant. I think that it's good because you never know, like the in-person people or like the stream when they're tuning in or when they got there to be able to introduce somebody again and give them that chance to shine.
No, I like that a lot. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, how do they grow it to get it more, to gain more spectators and followers? I mean, we talked about the community side, like getting more athletes involved and I guess more time to prep and,
I've had a couple of people say that they would have signed up if there was individual divisions for the age groupers. Like, so the age groupers could only sign up in pairs. The teams or the other side, they signed up in fours. There was no qualifier for any of those competitors. I think that if they offered individual divisions for the age groupers, you're going to get more of them, which I always think is a really good demographic to grab. I think how much of a percentage did they make up of like open registration? Like 60%
Yeah, it's
or
a
something.
huge portion. I mean, and they have disposable income to travel a lot of times.
Yeah, I think that if you take care of them, like we talked about earlier, like if you don't make them feel like they're second-class citizens on their own floor over on the side, like I think that could go a long way to helping to grow that. I also think that it's just, I think that they have to be able to mention CrossFit. I think that to be able to grow it, you almost have to either, whether it's collaboration or actually them just buying the rights to have competitive fitness or something like that. I think that that's their next steps. I think that being like trying to put yourself in a place where you're competing with CrossFit or like non-verbally competing with CrossFit, it's just, nobody's ever going to get to the top like that. It's just going to be a battle the whole way through. So this first season is kind of in place and we'll see where it goes. But I think that if those two compete with each other, the athletes are going to get broken, the fans' attention is going to get divided, and nobody's ever going to come out on top with that. I think sooner rather than later, we need to come to a place where there is agreement, there is maybe some sort of cooperation or collaboration that happens with who is actually hosting this season of competitive fitness so that everybody kind of knows what's going on, everybody has a season structure in place, the fans know where to look and who to follow.
Yeah.
I think that's how it grows.
I mean, that pretty much covers them. I was going to ask about Annika specifically. Annika came in, she punched her ticket the weekend before. How was her like mindset going into this performance? Did she feel less pressure and kind of like, I achieved this thing and that I've been working at for years after failure after failure?
Yeah. I mean, Annika's not like that. I don't think she's got like a good chill button in general. And also her workouts weren't validated by the time we got up there. So I think there was this underlying like concern on, it was either Friday night or Saturday night. She sent me a screen capture with every one of her workouts validated with no penalties. When she got that totally changed her mood state, like knowing that it was official. But she is very competitive. So while we were there, she was like, I want to do as well as possible, fully focus on every workout. She had a challenging first workout that didn't go according to plan. But aside from that, she competed awesome. And I don't even think the game stuff was like processing on her mind because she's very like in the competition, hyper focused. But in the announcement, one of the workouts she crushed, and they did the interview for her, and they talked about her support structure and stuff like that. She's talked about the journey of training for 7 years, which was a third of her life to make it to the games. And I was like, wow, like when it's put in that perspective, it was like a major accomplishment. But I think at the time of the interview, shit still wasn't official. So she was like unofficial. So it was like, we can't even freaking celebrate this thing that you've worked on. And had so many close misses.
I was in the crowd during that interview, and the amount of people around me were like, she's 21. She's been doing that for this long.
Baby.
Like, it blew everybody's mind.
I know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I still sometimes, we went out to dinner afterwards, and she like ordered a beer, and I looked over and I was like, are they going to ID her? And then I was like, oh, I forgot she's 21. I'd like still think of her like she's 19, like we just started.
She could have started drinking 3 years ago in Canada.
Yeah, that's true. I found out it's 18 or 19 in some provinces, which is weird.
Yeah, sounds like our sport.
Yeah, true.
That front squat race was so fun to watch.
Yeah, it was good.
That was one of the highlights.
Yeah.
What else do y'all have? Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm super proud of everybody that I had there. I think Matt had a really good time. Winning that first event was a pretty cool high. I think that over the course of the weekend, the level of competitiveness in that challenger division was pretty impressive to see. Those guys were something else. I would have liked to have seen the challengers do the same workouts as the pros for that reason.
Yes.
Those guys were smoking those workouts, and it would have been cool to see how those scores compared.
That was one of the highlights of my weekend. So I asked, I know like when I go to competitions, I only like generally focus on the people that I'm working with, but I asked Matt just randomly, I was like, hey, what time's your heat? I'm going to try to get here early and watch the first workout. And I showed up, I'm standing in the crowd, and I'm like, wow, there's 5 individual games athletes in the final heat of the challenger division, and then he freaking wins. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome.
That's awesome.
Okay, so the winner of the challenger, men and women, are both qualified for the games because Jennifer Muir just got a backfill and Tudor Magna already qualified. So it's like, come on.
I was talking about how awesome her Monday had to have been. She just won
Best
the
day of
challenger
her
division, and then gets an email the next morning, hey, you're bumped up. It's like, this is great.
That is something, I mean, either the same workouts, or I thought about this. Could they have just made a 50-person field and just had...
That's what some people have been suggesting. I mean, just as like a break, like a thought exercise.
I mean, I think almost everybody in the challenger division would have been able to shake up the leaderboard, and it would have changed things. You know, it might make it harder because then you're doing so many heats. And
I want to hear Chris's thoughts on this because I think that brings us back to
the regionals,
the field being too big, and that takes away from. Like you got to earn. Yeah, I want to choose these words carefully because there's obviously competitors that are like fit enough and deserve to be in the challenger division, but not that weekend. Like just on those tests, that's just where it stacked up. You know,
so have the divisions still exist separately and distinctly. Like, so the pros go here, the challengers are here, but give them the same workouts. What does it change?
The same workouts.
What does it change?
Well, I don't know, but what I think it could be to make it more exciting would be that there's more incentive as a challenger of how you do that weekend to make it into pro.
Yeah.
So that it's still separate, same workouts, but it's like they're fighting for that pro card very specifically.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is going to be the case. Like, it's like on the Corn Ferry Tour, you have a certain number of athletes that if you finish in the top part of the money list, it guarantees you a PGA Tour card. Could be the same type of thing. Maybe it's not you win a challenger event and you get into the next pro event, but if you are the top 2 challengers across the entire challenger season, you earn your pro card into the next season or something like that.
Something like that. Because right now you can basically make a good case of getting your pro card by being good at online qualifiers.
Yeah.
And I don't think that should be the case.
Yeah.
Or what if through the weekend you could go from challenger to pro?
Oh man!
Then you got to drop from pro.
Out.
Yeah, you got to get bumped out.
People's
That would be
schedules get all
savage.
messed up.
Yeah.
I like
by the
that
way, you're
idea.
going in 30 minutes because you got demoted.
I kind of like that idea.
You got
It's
relegated.
Like, hey man, we got some news. You got pushed down.
Yeah.
Like that
or
performance.
if they started with a bigger field and there was cuts, which would be very controversial.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. But do you guys follow Formula One racing?
Only the TV show.
Okay, so there's there's the different tiers and they race before. So I don't know if it could be something similar to that where it's like I just like the idea of that it's a show of what's to come for developing athletes. And then obviously every qualifier series is just going to have little biases that dictate who goes in, but I think over time it kind of levels it out.
Yeah, I think those issues just go away after year one, because then it will be like the new pro card. This year it was kind of like
They signed people
it was like
arbitrarily
nepotism,
a bit,
kind of, which had to be, right? You
Yeah.
need the best people
Yep.
there. But after this, it's like, all right, well, there's a structure where you got to earn that you maintain your right to be on this, and now you got a group of people that are fighting to take those, and then at some point it will become a meritocracy, just like, okay, well, the highest performing athletes get the pro cards, so it gives you like your carrot.
Was there an Outback?
Not that I saw. There probably was.
Yeah, there
What
definitely
a
was.
dud of an event.
Chris ranked the media side 8.5 out of 10.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Or a 9.
What do you mean by the media? Chris,
He doesn't have a mic, man.
shake up and down for confirmation. Side to side. If no, how was your experience on the media side? 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10, he says. Wow,
good.
nice. You want that pass next time.
Sucking up.
No, I don't have anything else. I think that covers a lot of it.
Yeah, I had a good time. I'm
Chris, 9.5 out of 10. Oh, 9.5 out of 10.
We got an extra
Okay.
0.5 out of
Yeah,
him.
what would?
What's the 0.5?
Yeah, what's the 0.5?
That we couldn't shoot on the VIP side.
He said he couldn't
Yeah,
shoot
yeah.
on the VIP
Yeah.
side.
So Chris, there was when you go to the floor, on one side of it, it was all like little VIP boxes. I don't know if people bought VIP tickets or if it was like sponsors, vendors, all that type of stuff. And media could be on the other side. So if somebody was in lane 10, he's basically like 80 yards away from them to try to take a picture. So he couldn't get on both sides of the floor. Whatever. I mean, we've been at competitions where you haven't even been allowed on the floor and you've had to be in the stands and take pictures.
That's the,
All right. How
All
do we
right, final
conclude
question.
this, baby?
Final question from Instagram. Chris Ensign asked, "Why did Jackie drop the worm?"
because the floor was messed up.
She said she's like tripped on the Dolomer mat
There
or
was
something.
they had to lunge onto a dollar mat. That's what I mean by the floor was too short. They needed to finish a lunge on a dollar mat, and allegedly her knee hit awkwardly, and I think she dropped multiple times.
Oh no.
Really, it's just because Chris left the toilet seat lit up or something.
Yeah, I'm
She was
sure.
just trying to sabotage him.
It's because we didn't play enough Halo while we were up there.
That's what it was.
Man, sounds like fun. I'd like to go to the next one.
Yeah. It's going to be in Phoenix end of August, right? August
Mesa.
20. What?
Yeah.
Oh,
Mesa.
Mesa. I thought you said May. I was like,
No.
it's May now.
They're going to host it outside,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the qualifier
gosh.
is what? July
July.
1st or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not
Comes
sure.
out?
Okay.
Yeah, I think overall I'm looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. To all the people that made the WFP possible, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you guys
stuff.
for
Good stuff.
posting your questions to Training Think Tank's channel as well as Max's. And then someone asked about a TTT coach meet and greet. We have community camp coming up. Adam, what are the exact dates?
Oh God.
June 22nd to 24th,
There
I
you
think.
go.
June 22nd to 24th.
Something
It's
like
on our
that.
website. We're also going to have a coach's breakfast. So if you're a TTT affiliate follower, pretty excited about putting that together.
Nice.
So good opportunity to come out and meet some coaches and hang out.
I
June
think we're gonna
20th
have,
to 22nd.
we're gonna have a little mini pickleball tournament on Friday during the day.
Oh, we
it's
are?
the best.
Oh, I got to start training.
Explain what a community camp is.
I mean, a community camp compared to the season prep camp is basically more about, like, picture the difference between Wadapalooza and WFP. Like, we're there to celebrate our connections. We're there to still test our fitness and, like, try and get some benchmark numbers going into a new season. But it's also, like, more often than not, we're going to be doing partner workouts, team workouts. We're going to do short style tests that aren't going to beat people up over the course of it. And then introducing things like pickleball, things like snatch workshops, just to make sure that it is inclusive. We are playing as much of a priority to making it as, like, approachable as possible so that we can capture as much of our TTT community as possible.
Yeah. A normal season prep camp, I feel like, is focused on individual competition readiness.
Yeah,
Whereas
it's-
this is like, hey, those people can come and you can still get training and hard training and feedback. But that's just not what it's about. It's about us just getting together.
Yeah. Season prep camp, very performance biased. This one is still going to have workouts, but it's more community connection based.
And you can come and get dominated in pickleball. I'm going to dominate everyone.
Oh, dominated by you. Oh,
Yeah, probably not.
Every
but I will
camp-
talk shit.
Every camp we do starts off with a bang of icebreakers. And one of the games, what does James call it? Entourage?
yeah.
Yeah. You gotta
You gotta experience
I'm
it.
not even gonna explain it, but it's the most intense game of rock, paper, scissors, depending on what hemisphere you're from.
I just rewatched
That you've ever seen.
Yeah, I rewatched the video that Chris made last night about the last camp that we did, and one of the scenes is I forgot the guy's name who won.
Brady.
He won, and they were like pulling his hand up, and he is so fired up, and I was like, oh, this is such a good moment. Yeah. He's like fired up like he just won the game. So it was just it's rock, paper, scissors. We're all screaming. It was good.
All right. That's all I got. Thanks for listening.
Peace.